Hey guys, Rominating Reaper here. So I've just got done watching Back in Action. This is a new film from Seth Gordon, who previously directed the first Horrible Bosses. This is a Netflix original action comedy that, quite notably, has the hook of being Cameron Diaz's first film role in like 10 years. Obviously, giving the title Back in Action a bit of a literal meaning. So, obviously, yes, with this being a bit of a comeback vehicle, I obviously went into this with a certain level of curiosity. Even with those three dreaded words Netflix original film, I still end with some level of hope because Netflix can sometimes slip a good movie through the system. See, recently, Carry On, which has gone on to become one of their biggest films of all time. But is this an entertaining, crowd pleasing vehicle worthy of its returning star? Well, let's find out. So the film follows Emily and Matt, two CIA agents who, after a successful mission, learn that Emily is pregnant, and so they leave that life behind and go off grid to lead a simpler life, raising their kids Alice and Leo. However, 15 years later, out of the blue, an old agency pal, Chuck, shows up to tell them that their cover is blown and that their old enemies are headed their way. And so they soon find themselves drawn back into the world of international espionage, a life they previously thought had left behind. Only this time, their kids are in tow. At this point, I think a good frame of reference when it comes to Netflix original films is McDonald's. What do I mean by that? Well, McDonald's obviously does food that'll satisfy your cravings in the moment, but won't necessarily leave you too nutritionally fulfilled in the long run. While Netflix makes movies that are slick, you know, highly produced star vehicles that will, ultimately not remember too much about in the long run. All of that to say that this is a pretty typical Netflix film. Like, it certainly has stuff in there that you can probably be entertained by while watching, but when the credits roll, how much of it will actually stay with you? To its credit, it does have the winning on screen pairing of Cameron Diaz and Jamie Foxx. They are a very likable pair. You can definitely buy into their relationship, and they definitely do a good job. Obviously, with the cool secret agent stuff, but also the parents struggling to bond with their kids stuff. It's pretty familiar, but it does get some sweet moments out of it, and it is carried along nicely thanks to that genuine chemistry between Diaz and Fox. That you can definitely tell that Cameron Diaz in particular is definitely relishing being back on screen. Everything around it though, yeah, is pretty generic. This is a pretty much as by the books as sort of spy film as you can get. There's a plot involving what's known as an ICS key, and some sort of shady black market dealings to sell this thing to like the highest bidder, and like there's hired mercenaries involved. It's pretty familiar stuff, and even with the sort of likable central pairing of Cameron Diaz and Jamie Foxx, it doesn't do too much to really make itself stand out from its other contemporaries. Uh, the action scenes are actually alright. I thought they did an okay job with those. Like, there's certainly some good choreography, and Diaz and Fox do a good job with that whole physicality, although the abundance of cuts does somewhat undermine the impact of it. Because remember, this is got to be a 12, mass appeal is the goal here. As does some moments of very ropey CGI and obvious sound stages, particularly in an opening plane scene and a speedboat chase late on in the film. It very much does give it this sort of artificial digital sheen to it, which sort of drains it of any sort of tension and impact. Cinematography wise, it's also nothing special either. It's pretty typical, flat, sort of washed out looking Netflix movie. Very much shot in in wides for maximum coverage. Yeah, it doesn't really do anything particularly special, bring any like flair or energy to it. I think what somewhat carries the film through though is the acting. Obviously, yes, the I mentioned Cameron Diaz and Jamie Foxx, but there's the supporting cast around them actually does have some fairly big hitters. Obviously, we have Glenn Close as Diaz's sort of emotionally distant mother, Ginny. I very much enjoyed her scenes. I especially enjoyed Jamie Demetriou as as Ginny's lover, Nigel, who's this incompetent spy in training. In fact, pretty much all of the laughs that happen in this film come from him. He is very, very funny. If you haven't, I would highly recommend you watch Statlet's Flats. If you want to see more of just Jimmy Demetriou doing his thing, because yeah, he's very funny and very gifted comic actor. Sort of the big disappointments of the cast though are Andrew Scott and Kyle Chandler, two very good actors. Scott always gives great performances. Chandler is always a very likable screen presence, but you can definitely tell the pair of them are pulling their punches a bit. You can definitely feel like they've been wasted on what is basically a paycheck film. Although, saying that, it does feel especially funny after Andrew Scott gave an absolutely fantastic performance in All of Us Strangers to follow that up with this. Also, saying that, I am looking forward to seeing Kyle Chandler as Hal Jordan in James Gunn's DCU. It feels like an unpopular opinion, but whatever. He's a good actor. I like him. I'm definitely curious to see what he'll bring to that role, especially acting opposite Aaron Pierre as John Stewart, Green Lantern. And the child acting it's child acting, I guess. It's not great, but there's worse child acting out there in film. And obviously, yes, it leads right through to the final act, which has a big twist that you will guess long before it actually occurs. It's very, very obvious. You do not need to be Sherlock Holmes to figure it out, which is ironic I make that reference because Andrew Scott played Moriarty. But yeah, there's a big twist, very predictable, and it leads to a pretty obvious final act with aforementioned big speedboat chase, but also does get in some sweet moments of character bonding for its central cast, for our two leads and the kids, that will sort of leave you with a smile on your face. And obviously it ends teasing a sequel, because of course it does, and this will absolutely happen. This will rake in however many hundreds of millions of viewers on Netflix, raking in like billions of minutes viewed, or however Netflix is going to spin it to make it seem like a huge massive hit that everyone has seen, and get that sequel fast tracked into production. Overall though, Back in Action, it's pretty much exactly what you'd expect. It's a sort of middle of the road forgettable film that does have entertaining moments that will leave you somewhat satisfied, but ultimately won't leave too much of an impression in the long run. Still, it is at least somewhat worth it, just for Cameron Diaz and Jamie Foxx. Out of 10, Back in Action gets a 5. So yeah, let me know down in the comments. Have you seen Back in Action? What did you think of it? Will you be watching the sequel the ending sets up? And now that Cameron Diaz is seemingly back in action, pun unintentional, would you like to see her take on more big films like this? Let me know all that down in the comments. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you're new. And don't forget to turn on post notifications so you don't miss an upload.